Hello, and welcome to another episode of Aiding Your Game, a web series where we discuss how to augment, enhance, and drive engagement in your role-playing games. Over the past few videos, we've talked a lot about setting up those initial stories and keeping them manageable. Today, we're going to put it into practice by creating a single story for an adventure in both Dungeons and Dragons and a Star Wars campaign setting. Let's get to it. So, we've gathered our players. We have a date set, and now we're getting ready to begin our role-playing game. This first example, we'll use Dungeons and Dragons, and we'll set a single story for this first session. Because we don't have everybody's specifics on time allotments, day allotments, and all of the logistical needs that need to be reviewed prior to creating our first story, we're just going to make some generic assumptions that we're going to be playing within a week, and we're going to have about 4 hours of game time. So with that in mind, we've gotten some information from our characters on what their backgrounds are, who they're going to be playing, and now we want to begin setting a beginning storyline that opens up the role-playing to the players. So, just for ease and quickness for this one, we're going to be using a high fantasy setting, with the characters being heroic. So a good setting and a good branch of characters. So that way we have some basic starting points. I'm going to be taking some notes and we'll review them throughout the series. So we know that with this high fantasy setting, the characters are going to be good, the heroes in this setting, and this is an introductory piece. The players are going to be coming together for the first time, so the first thing we have to think about is on that epic high fantasy story, bringing those characters together, what would drive a group of adventurers who have come from all different backgrounds and walks of life to working together as a team. Obviously, it's varied and challenging based on who the characters are, what their backgrounds are, and how they perceive their characters as working in a group. Common meme you see is, I'm the lone wolf, and it gets a lot of slack. However, there can be wolves who can be part of the pack who may not run with the pack. But again, we're going to be looking at this as though it's everybody after the same type of goal, and that's having a great experience around the table, playing a fantastic game. So to start this session out, we talked about having 3 kind of pieces to each story, and that is going to be that discovery or exploration piece, an encounter piece, and then a resolution place. Because we're looking at 4 hours of this gameplay, we're going to set up 4 of those. So the first one is the exploration or discovery piece. This one here is going to be getting the characters grouped together in the same environment so that they can ultimately have that encounter be some type of an interpretive getting together or working together, deciding they are going to adventure together, and then the resolution piece of that will be them branching off to go take that adventure on. So looking at it this way, everybody talks about how tired the meeting in a tavern is, so why not throw them in and have them be prisoners? I think that's possibly even more tired. Rather than that, we're going to say, because these adventurers are not just commoners, that they have been summoned from their respective backgrounds to meet with someone who has an adventure hook. So we know right away that we need to have some type of a benefactor to bring all of them together. For the sake of this story, I'm going to say it's going to be a merchant who has heard the deeds of the different heroes on his travels through the realm. Having heard of these heroes being braver, stronger, smarter, more magical, whatever the case may be, he has personally invited them to meet with him because he has an adventure for them that he needs them to go on. Now, this can be in a city square, it can be in a tavern, it can be on a crossroads where several different kingdoms may meet, or routes for the merchant to have traveled. Whatever the location is, we want to make sure that everybody knows that it's a fairly familiar location, because we don't want to have to dive too much into it. I kind of like the crossroads idea, so that's what this merchant decides to do, is have everybody meet at the crossroads. Now, the merchant has traveled quite a bit. He's seen quite a bit. He's experienced quite a bit. He's no stranger to the road. So what could it be that has him needing to hire out for adventurers? And there again, it could be something as easy as bandits taking over the road. He wants to open a new road that goes along some wilderness that is occupied by goblins. It could be something that one of his caravans has been stolen. All different kinds of options. Like we saw in last video, don't hesitate to just thumb through some materials and get an idea. For this one, because they're meeting at a crossroads, we'll assume the merchant is kind of in and around moving, and we'll say there's a road that he wants to open up, but has not been able to do so. So I'm just going to jot that down and open a new road. Maybe it's a pre-existing road where he needs access to be able to increase his sales or begin a new trade route. Regardless, now we have just a good understanding of what's brought the characters together, kind of the pitch that the merchant is going to do, and of course we have to have that carrot at the end of the rope. What are the characters interested in that will drive them to work together to overcome this challenge and come back together at the end? An easy enough one is reward. Keep it about the money, armor, whatever those character kind of drives can be. In this case, because it's a merchant, we'll assume he's fairly well off. He's going to offer a substantial reward. And just making these notes, we have already just a quick list of things that we want to work on. We need a merchant. In this case, we're going to make him or her, whatever your preferences are, be a fairly wealthy merchant who can pay to have adventurers meet at a crossroads to discuss opening a new road, and he's going to offer a substantial reward. So that's our first exploration part. The encounter is meeting with that merchant, having that discussion, having him give some clues and hints, and the resolution should be the characters taking on the job. So that's part one. Moving on to part two, now we know kind of the background. We've set up a story. We've decided that these heroes are going to be benefacting a merchant. Part two is going to be actually taking on the road. Now that first part should not take a full hour. It could, it's hard to say. Plan for the worst, hope for the best. Players will always find ways to surprise you. For this next one, at this point, because it's opening a new road, or maybe a road that's ancient and forgotten, the exploration is actually going to be more wilderness exploration. So we know they need an area. We need to know kind of where it leads to, why it's important to this merchant. So let's say this is an ancient road that leads to a shortcut, and possibly visits a village that the merchant has not been able to access. Now, for the encounter, we need to decide what is that encounter. Could be something as mundane as bad weather, where the characters have to overcome elements and possibly take refuge in a cave. All kinds of opportunities here for what that encounter piece of it is. As they're exploring the area, they have to have something to interact with. I do kind of like the idea of raging storms driving them into a cave. Let's go with that one. We'll make it weather related. Nasty lightning storms, sudden rains, and flash flooding. Always definitely something that's challenging. At this point here, this is where the challenges can become more dangerous for the characters than just talking to a merchant on the road. In this one here, they'll have to do checks. They'll have to take all kinds of precautions. They should be recording what they're doing with any of their gear. This is where they should be assuming more of that role-playing piece with their character. What would their characters see and do? This is also going to put them to the test. Are they going to work together? Are they going to work together well? And while it could be extremely challenging, it does not always have to mean life and death. So I think that's a good encounter. Resolution-wise, let's say through survival or perception checks, something along those lines, they do find some type of a cave to hole up in. So now we know in this one here, the discovery piece is exploring this ancient road. The weather is going to be the challenge of the encounter, and the resolution is they're going to be finding a cave to hole up in to let the storm pass. So far, I think we're doing pretty good. Timing wise, it's not taking up that much. Of course, this is very much on the fly. A lot of times as I'm planning, I've got a little bit more at stake here, but we're doing this as an example. Hope you're following along. Hope it's going at a good pace, and don't hesitate to, as you're watching, be jotting down some notes and ideas on yours. Hopefully this helps stir some of that creativity in you as well. Currently we've got 2 encounter breaks complete. We said we're going to plan about a 4-hour session. I don't think either one of these is going to be a full hour, and that can be a really good thing. Now the next one, we want to incorporate something for the fighters, the barbarians, even the spellcasters who want to stretch their legs. We need to have some type of combat. After all, it's Dungeons and Dragons, and combat is a part of the game. So for this one, we know they're now in a cave system, being protected by the rain. Again, all kinds of ideas start coming to my mind. Everything from inspired pieces like out of The Hobbit, where the goblins are taking on the dwarves kind of secretively from the cave back, to finding something that's been hidden for ages, some type of an ancient cavern system with an underground city. It could be something as easy as it's just a cavern that could require exploring, kind of tying a little bit more into that nature theme. In this case, I'm going to say I think an ancient hidden underground city could be kind of cool, and while it could lead to kind of a bigger storyline than we need, we'll just say this is a small scale, possibly something that has collapsed around the perimeters, and the characters will not be able to explore all of it. So there is a little bit of railroading, but again, we know we only have 4 hours. Let's keep it on track and get to the meat of it. So in this one here, the exploration of the cave, we'll put is an ancient city ruins. Now, because they're going to be exploring ancient city ruins, what better thing than some type of undead? Of course, you hear a lot that undead skeletons and zombies are also very overdone. To each their own. It could be something different. You can make it goblins, you can make it orcs, you can make it anything you like. Just trying to stick to basics here. I think we are going to go into the ancient city is haunted with skeletons, and we'll also have a white in there just for that higher challenge rating if we have higher player characters. And we could even say, if we want to expand it a little bit and have a little bit larger area, more time on this third section, since the first two should not have taken full hours each. We've got a little bit more time for them to spend in this kind of dungeon crawl setting. Let's say that there could possibly be a dark mantle, good kind of tried and true Dungeons and Dragons monsters. So nothing that should be too overwhelming for them. Of course, we can amp these up and down as needed, but this then gives us that encounter piece as they're going through and exploring. These skeletons who are still standing sentinel in this ancient city are not happy with the trespassers, and the white is going to try to defend the primary throne room from these intruders. And a dark mantle just catches them off guard. Of course, they are more of a mundane type of monster, but they can be very crafty and really kind of that environmental piece that you want to incorporate in. So we've got a good encounter there. It should have quite a bit of combat, and opportunity for each of the different players to use some of their combat skills. Now, of course, for the resolution, who doesn't love some reward and treasure? Here is where one part of our culture really goes overboard and has vast treasures, and the player characters at that point, they may decide that it's not worth going back to the merchant and finishing the road mapping piece. At this here, I like to keep it a little more down to earth and grounded in reality, even though we are in a make-up land. Instead of just having coins and gold and things like that, I like to look at what are some of the treasures that the skeletons would have as part of their person. Look at rings, shields, weapons, things that the characters can use, things that they can find some type of value in, but they're not able to just go and buy 5,000 healing potions. Keep it to where it's very important to them to be collecting that reward, but don't make it to where it breaks the game. So now we've got that resolution by exploring and overcoming the skeletons, the white and the dark mantle. They have gotten some reward. However, we do need to steer it back onto the track of them getting this crossroad opened for this merchant who is taking the long way around, and we'll meet them there. At that point, you can have the storms outside subside, and the characters can continue exploring the road. At this juncture, that fourth kind of story is kind of the exploration, the encounter, and then the reward. So for the exploration, because that was a good scenario and there was a lot going on, we've covered a lot, the rest of that exploration could just be the road has just been overgrown with trees and forgotten. However, it is manageable in a small scale, and it does lead to the city where the merchant is waiting. Or you could have it just go to a new village that the characters can interact with, and then have to return back to the merchant to inform him what's gone on. I think with this story here, I like the idea of the road being just forgotten and overcome with nature, because it is an ancient road. As they're exploring, maybe we'll throw in a couple of items for them that they're finding, these ancient markers for the roadway, but now wrapped with the roots of trees, and using some of their checks and some of their abilities and feats, they should be able to determine that this road may be passable only in a certain time of year because of the flash flooding. So lots of opportunities for them to again use some of their non-combat skills. If they really enjoyed the combat at this point, it may not hurt to put some type of a combat encounter or two on the road proper, and that's why this road hasn't been used. If they did extremely well against the skeletons and the wights and the dark mantles, now let's really throw them for a loop and put something more nature related in there. Of course, another diehard is giant spiders. You can have giant fire beetles. Look at some type of a beast and incorporate that in. With my notes here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in giant frogs, because sometimes as you throw things out that they may not be expecting, it can be a lot of fun, and they'll really have to utilize some of their perception skills and everything, or suddenly one of the players could be wrapped up with a giant frog's tongue pulled into his mouth. Could be a lot of fun for the other player characters to interact in some type of a situation like that. So we're going to have giant frogs. We're going to have difficult terrain with trees, underbrush, and I think that's pretty good. That should lead into the encounter piece of it. Now for the resolution, that part here is not going to be, in my notes, that monetary piece. The resolution from this one here is they're able to forge that road through, find their way into at the edge of the valley into the small city, and meet with that caravan merchant. That in and of itself is that reward piece. He's going to give them, from back in the beginning, a substantial reward. Should not be game breaking by any means, but by this point you should have a good idea based on the encounters that we've experienced. Is it going to be monetary? Is it going to be arms and armor? Is it going to be just some type of trade goods? What is it that's kind of driving them? What are they focused on? What are they looking for? What are they lacking? And what do they have too much on? Maybe it's something where he's going to buy goods from them that they've collected on the way and leave their purses a little bit heavier than what any other merchant would. However you play that, it should be built off of the previous encounters. So there we've got a pretty good story. We'll definitely take these notes and refine them, making sure that we hit each of the pieces, get everything prepped in time with these 4 different sessions. Pieces, we know exactly what we need to have stats for, what kind of maps we want to have prepped up, or just be able to talk about for Theater of the Mind. We know what we want to review for weather and its impact on the players, and possibly start thinking about that bigger piece with this ancient city underground in the cave. Some of the characters may start to be asking, why was it there? What else is there? Is there anything we missed? Of course, we have to have that hook in there. That hook has got to remain. Possibly something in that end resolution as they are collecting their reward or talking to that merchant. Have them recognize from the white or the skeletons, whether it's some type of a scarf, armor, could even just be some type of a flag or banner in the city itself. That merchant has something similar, and as he is giving them their reward, he could be thanking them and hinting that by helping him recover a piece of his past, they've just proven their worth, and now he has another task for them. We always want to hook them in, find that piece that really connects from the middle, from the meat of the game to the end, to make them want to come back. If you end the story, it's very possible without that hook that they may still want to come and play because they've enjoyed themselves. They were able to use some of their character feats and features and really show off what their characters can do or role play with each other really well. But having that hook is just going to help drive that engagement of, well, now I need to know, was he from that ancient village? Did he know about it the whole time? Is that why he sent us on this route? Because there's got to be some more to it, some more to the story than that. Ultimately, you don't have to make it that big of a play, and at the beginning of the next session, you don't have to carry on that same storyline. Perhaps the merchant tells them that he'll meet them at a later date and time. This allows you to put that merchant on the back burner, kind of percolate him, and think of what you want to do with it. Do you want to explore that story any further? Do you want to build upon that? Are there parts and pieces of that that can play into a bigger story once you have a good flowing session with good engaged players who are coming up to play the game regularly, on time, and engaged? So that was our D&D example. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was very beneficial, and I really hope you use some of the tools that I use and have used for years. And now we're going to change the pace quite a bit and go from a high fantasy Dungeons and Dragons setting into a Star Wars. So regardless of the game system you play, it's all about role-playing at a tabletop. Switching up from the Dungeons and Dragons theme that we started with, let's go into a little bit of Star Wars because it is another very popular RPG, quite a few different systems out there for it. I played the West End games Star Wars for many, many, many years. Still love it, still love to play it. Age of Rebellion I love. There's quite a few different options for Star Wars, and with the number of fans, I think we should pay it some service. So, utilizing the same techniques that we have for the last example, we're going to build a single story on Star Wars and use the same setups, techniques, and the whole 9 yards. So for our first one, it could be a little bit easier. The players are all going to be rebels, of course, and making the kind of introduction. Again, you can meet in the cantina, which everybody says is too tired and true. All different kinds of things. In this one, we're going to use what we used in the last one because I want you to see how versatile it is. So we're going to start with a merchant. This merchant is kind of like the Jabba. He's got his hands in a lot of pots. He's buying and selling. His forte is goods. However, he's been squeezed and pinched by the Empire just like everybody else, and he's willing to sponsor some people or explore his possibility of joining the rebellion. Whatever the characters' background stories, their skill sets, whatever their characters are, the common theme should be the Rebel versus Empire or Empire versus Rebel, however you play. For this example, it's going to be Rebels. So our rebels are going to meet with a merchant. He is going to have heard from them from their kind of backgrounds and send them each a message to meet him at this location on, you can choose anywhere in the galaxy far, far away. For this example, we want to kind of tie it into the original movies. Of course, I'm going to show my age. And so he wants to meet with them on Yavin, where it is a rebel base. So as the player characters meet with that merchant, that's that exploration. They're going to be looking around, they're going to be talking, they're going to be engaging with this merchant, trying to figure out why they're there, what is in it for them. It's all about that exploration. That encounter is with the merchant proper, who is at this point going to say he has a line on some goods that are going to benefit the rebellion, but he does not have access to them. So it's all about acquiring goods. Of course, with the rebels, they are kind of strapped for some of the better equipment and everything that versus the Empire. So it's going to be a good hook, in my opinion. And if the players have a ship, great. If not, they'll get a loaner from the merchant, but they have to acquire the goods. And again, he's going to offer them a substantial reward. Maybe it's said ship on payments. Maybe it's just credits. Maybe it's droids. Whatever it is, what's that hook? So that's our first piece. The second one is going to be actually going to acquire the goods. In this example, I said I'm going to show my age and go with the original trilogy. So I like to tie things in, especially with something as common as Star Wars, where it's got such recognition, into where the characters can kind of feel the action moving along as they're watching the shows when they do. So for this one, I think what we'll do is have the merchant used to be an arms trader, and when the Empire was just forming, of course, like most contractors, they'll build something and try to get the bid for the military. In this case, it is speeders, because I just had a great idea. So heavily armored speeders, they're going to be great on Yavin and give the rebels an edge. These speeders were initially constructed for that contract for the Empire, but the Empire did not choose them and instead elected to go with TIEs. And so these speeders were built, they were tested, and now they're sitting in storage. And so it's up to the characters to go and acquire these speeders and bring them back for the rebels. So we'll say that these speeders are going to be on, and again, you can choose any location you want. In this case, let's say that these speeders are going to be on Ord Mantell. It doesn't get a whole lot of talk, so we can flesh things out as we go, kind of make it our own. So with these speeders, they're on Ord Mantell. The exploration part is going to be the players exploring a bit of Ord Mantell. Let's say they have to meet a contact who is going to lead them or get them instructions on how they can get these speeders, and the resolution will be kind of the plans on what they want to do, how they're going to do it. That resolution is, again, it's not going to be monetary, but it is going to be information, it's going to be knowledge that they'll be able to use. So on Ord Mantell, they'll have to meet a contact, they'll have to begin planning, and for the resolution, they will get plans and information and info. So we've got that second one done. At this point, we know in that second one The information that they're going to get is that there are, let's say, a dozen. There are 12 speeders. They'll have a map to the location of them. Let's say this is going to be on a far off kind of industrial area with large, almost hangar-like storage places. They'll have to decide how they're going to get past the Imperials who are flying regular patrols, especially if they're going to go undetected, which ultimately, possibly that's what we want to do. They need to sneak in and sneak out with these. Let's say that's part of the goal. The contact does not want larger Imperial presence on the planet, so it's got to be sneaky. There's got to be a lot of subterfuge, and maybe that's something that your players don't want to do, which is fine too. It doesn't mean that's the way they're going to play, of course. Hope for the best, plan for the worst. So on this one here, we now know that they're going to get information on 12 speeders. They're going to have the location. They're going to know when they're going to be able to go. They'll be able to start planning. In our session 3, this is again into the meat of the story. This is where we should have the location planned, including how often the set of 3 TIE fighters are going to be flying over, making it more challenging for our heroes to get those speeders. And again, plan for the worst, because maybe that they decide to bring their ship to that location and load the speeders there. If so, they'll really have to watch their timing. It may be where they want to fly the speeders out, kind of a gone in 60 seconds kind of feel. Again, we didn't talk much about the story we wanted to set. Whatever that story theme is, that's the way it should play out. But I don't think there's a wrong way to do any of them. It's however you want that story to unfold along with your players. So let's say for this one, we want to combine it a little bit. They want to get their ship as close as possible, but then have to speed out of the hangar with the speeders in between the TIE fighters that fly overhead to their ship. Some good discovery at this location here. We'll be scouting it out, interacting with the schedules of the TIE fighter. The encounter itself should be getting to the hangar and finding these speeders are the snow speeders that were used in Empire Strikes Back. It's a good kind of tie-in to the movies. We can explain it away in that on Hoth, the speeders needed to be prepared because they weren't designed for Hoth. They were designed for Ord Mantell, and they would have worked perfect in the Rebel base on Yavin. But of course we know Yavin has to be abandoned pretty quick prior to the end of the first movie, so we can tie it into the movies really well. This is before they had the speeders at the end of Star Wars, and before the beginning of Empire Strikes Back when they're retrofitting them. So kind of fun way to tie into the movies. So we know that they will be sneaking in and then speeding out and trying to avoid detection. And this should be, again, the meat and potatoes of it. The scheduling of the flights, if there are any foot patrols, and of course lots of checks for them using their subterfuge to get their ship as close as they can to this location, but then also getting these speeders going fast to the location of their ship. Lots of opportunity for different characters to shine. And then the fourth one, of course, really depends on their success or failure here, is the kind of outcome, that final episode for those 3 plot parts. So for this, what we're going to plan is on the exploration, they need to find a way to break orbit and get away so they can head to Yavin with their newly acquired 12 speeders. So they need to explore extraction, and their interaction. Of course, here is where that starship combat could come in, or even starship hand-to-hand if they get boarded. So we definitely want to have some type of a Imperial roadblock, or even just customs inspectors, some type of a challenge from the Imperial. Of course, we want to keep reiterating that the Empire is the bad guys and our heroes for the rebellion are good. So keep that theme up. And then the final piece is the resolution of them getting to Yavin, or Yavin 4. So we've got our 4 sections just roughly planned out. We know again what we need to focus on, where we need to build more details, what kind of information we need prepped for this game session. Based on the initial discussion, we said we had a week before we had to meet up to play, so we've got some information that we want to get together, get organized, get ready to go. Of course, we want to plan for the worst and hope for the best. So if, say, in session 3 they decide not to sneak in, you need to have the stats for your TIE fighters and what their patterns are. Kind of think about if there is a sudden alarm that they're not expecting, what are they going to do? Possibly they're going to bring in some type of mechanized unit if they don't believe there's anything too dangerous, and the TIE fighters will just give support from the sky. Lots that we can work on here. A great story. Of course, that end hook as the heroes arrive back at the rebel base. They've done really well, and the merchant has another plan for them. But just before that happens, the Death Star should be coming into view, kind of that moonrise kind of look. Use that as that ominous piece. This should leave the characters wanting to come back for more. They want to know what's going to happen. They've got a ship full of speeders now that they need to save from the Empire. They've got at some point to meet back up with this merchant and take on another job. It does not have to be the theme of the story, but it's a great one story launching point. The next session could start up as much as when the Death Star was destroyed, the heroes delivered the ships to Echo Base and were kind of sent on their way. It's however you want to frame that up. Just leave a hook there that you can tie back into should you want to, should your player show interest, and if you want to keep that story building from that single story session. So I hope that was beneficial and helpful. For today's episode, we built 2 single stories, one for Dungeons and Dragons, one for Star Wars, and using just a very simple plot process and just giving some rough draft parts to it. We have 2 single story sessions that we can flesh out and play at a later date. Of course, these here, I think we're going to do something a little bit different. We're actually going to begin fleshing these out and have them available on our Wix webpage. So watch for these. If you enjoyed them, feel free. They're going to be lots of good Game Aid information that you can download and use in your own home games. If you find it helpful, if you find it beneficial, if you find it amusing and fun, make sure you like, subscribe, follow us. Of course, we're just about out of time on our Kickstarter. Please help us raise the news and get some better quality videos going for our season 2. We're very short on time for this season, so make sure you're commenting on what you'd like to see in the next couple of sessions. We want to make sure that the content is very beneficial and helpful to you, and at the same time, something that you'll be able to use in your own game settings. So, until next time, where will your adventures take you?